Socrates, that old chap, was only about 80 years younger than our own master Confucius in China. The two never met, but it's as if they held a secret meeting, exhibiting two distinct shared quirks among philosophical giants. Too cool for school, both gentlemen were immensely aloof, insisting their entire lives on writing no works whatsoever. They refused to record their thoughts in writing. Perhaps they felt their thoughts were too high-res for low-def paper, opting instead to leave all intellectual property to posterity for guesswork and organization. Teaching zealots. Despite refusing to write themselves, both were incredibly passionate about teaching students. Their disciples were everywhere, laying a solid human foundation stone for the spread of their ideas. Confucius, the older gentleman, did leave a tiny loophole regarding penmanship. He meticulously compiled the Spring and Autumn Annals, a highly condensed record of major events in his state of Lu over 300 years. The total word count for this river of history? Only about 12,000 characters. 300 years of history in 12,000 words. This level of conciseness was so extreme, it drove later textual scholars absolutely bonkers, forcing them to spend centuries trying to figure out what he meant. Beyond that, Confucius mainly acted as a supreme document organizer, neatly packaging ancient literature, poetry, and political texts, such as China's Classic of Poetry and Book of Documents. As for his own core philosophy, which influenced thousands of years of thought, sorry, but that was diligently noted down by his students in their little notebooks, eventually compiled into the golden quote collection known as the Analects. Socrates, however, was even more OG. His daily job was simply to find people to debate, acting like a philosophical street DJ, ready to drop into perpetual soul interrogation mode anytime, anywhere. How are you living? What are you thinking? Are you sure what you're saying is the truth? All his precious thoughts survived solely through the brains and pens of his students, especially that young fellow he recruited around age 61, a 20-something named Plato. If it weren't for this chief scribe, we'd probably have to guess whether a person named Socrates even existed 2,500 years ago. Plato compiled his teacher's intellectual stand-up routines into the dialogues, and this student, Plato, later mentored an even more legendary student named Aristotle. See, the torch of human civilization's thought was passed down exactly like this, from one old man too lazy to do his own writing, to another, and so on. Despite the geographical distance and lack of acquaintance, the wings of civilization eventually reach every corner of the earth. The original creators probably never realized that their few words would leave an internal imprint on the behavior and speech of future generations. Out in the public forum, Socrates was as sharp, witty, and free-spirited as ever, wielding extraordinary charisma in a crowd. But the moment he returned to his tiny lair of a home, he immediately put on the meek, little house husband persona. Perhaps weighed down by his own famously ugly, snub-nosed, pot-bellied philosophical appearance, Socrates was married to a notoriously bad-tempered wife. Posterity summed him up perfectly. A giant in the forum, a mouse in the house. The story goes that one time, after his wife unleashed a torrent of fierce scolding and still felt unsatisfied, she grabbed a basin of water and unceremoniously dumped it right over Socrates' head. Just then, a friend came to visit. Socrates shook his dripping head, instantly switched on his master humorist mode, and shrugged. I knew it. After thunder, there is always rain. He deeply understood one thing. Home was not a place for reasoned debate. He knew his true territory was outside, among the crowds who were willing to listen to him reason. However, this utterly uncompromising old man, who argued with heaven and earth, soon paid the ultimate price for his free-spirited nature. The rulers of Athens could no longer tolerate Socrates, deeming him simply too eccentric. So they slapped him with two major charges: impiety toward the gods and corrupting the youth. At the age of 70, he was sent to court. The indictment read like a bizarre character file. Socrates is an evildoer and a busybody, investigating things beneath the earth and in the sky, making the worse appear the better reason, and teaching these things to others. But Socrates was completely unafraid. He calmly gave his defense in court, a speech often regarded as the GOAT of courtroom defenses. Regarding evildoing, he said he had never been charged under any law his entire life, and all he had ever done was seek the truth. Regarding wisdom, he said his initial motivation for seeking truth was only to prove that he himself was not wise, but utterly ignorant. Regarding corruption, he pointed out that while he had many students, he never charged a penny. He was in fact the poorest teacher around. What he taught his students and what he did his whole life was the same: discovering one's own ignorance. He concluded his defense by dropping a huge flag for the court. God has commanded me to fulfill the mission of a philosopher, to examine myself and others. As long as I draw breath, I will never stop practicing and teaching philosophy and exhorting every person I meet. The judges were moved by his statement, allowing him to choose his own punishment between the legal penalty and the responsibility he chose to bear. It was the court offering him a way out, basically saying, "Old man, just admit defeat and we can all go home." But Socrates completely rejected the notion that he was guilty, merely suggesting the court fine him a small amount. And immediately his students, Plato included, scrambled to pay the paltry fine on the spot. This act utterly triggered the presiding judges. They felt Socrates was mocking the court. The majority of them condemned Socrates to death, sending him to go to hell via poison hemlock. Socrates' friends and students tried to organize a jailbreak to rescue him, but Socrates refused. He told them that since the court had sentenced him to death, he should obey the verdict, as he was a law-abiding Athenian, a conviction his own pursuit of truth had led him to. He complied with the law, but he did not admit guilt. The final moment arrived. The jailer brought a cup of poison. Before his weeping friends and students, Socrates delivered his most nonchalant farewell. "The hour of departure has arrived, and we go our separate ways, I to die and you to live. Which of these two is better is known to God alone." With that, Socrates took the cup and drank it in one gulp. The year was 399 BC. Socrates was 70 years old. Socrates thus departed Athens and the world. But he left behind the seeds of human civilization along with his own iconic and perhaps later dramatized likeness. His love of debate, his constant questioning, and his unwillingness to compromise eventually became the defining watershed of Greek philosophy. However, subsequent history also shows that the spread of civilization is not always gentle, nor is it always accomplished through words. On the contrary, in many periods, it has been disseminated through fire, blood, death, plunder, and deceit. And that is something the original creators of civilization could not have foreseen.